Right, it's a new series. And actually, according to Jesus, other than basic salvation, this is actually the most important thing you can listen to. It might not seem like it, but it is. And because Jesus said that what we do with our possessions and our money is actually the proving ground of our faith. He said, if you're not faithful in the least of these, how can we trust you with more? And so Jesus kind of gave it this big premium. Now, it's a little while since I've talked about money, and I don't do it that often. But what I'm going to do this morning, I'm going to come at it from a different angle in this series than we've come at it before. To try and help us put things in a bigger context, because sometimes we get principles here and there without actually understanding how God's big picture. So this is different. So if you've heard me talk about money before, which you probably haven't particularly over the years, then this is different. So you need to listen to it. It's kind of really important. Now, when you saw that title come up, Money Talks, I don't know what kind of reaction you had. And maybe it either made you feel like this is a bit weird, or this is a bit churchy, or I'm worried, or both, or no reaction whatsoever. But we all have reactions when people talk about money, and when church talks about money, and when God talks about money. And the reason for that is we tie a lot of who we are to our possessions and to our finances. And that's partly why Jesus talks so much on this topic. He actually talked more on this topic than any other thing, which is strange, isn't it? Because it's the thing we like least listening to. And so just to kind of step back a bit, okay? So 18 years ago, a little bit more than that, I asked, and Cheryl asked, a small group of people, including ourselves, eight people at that time. And we asked them, sat in our dining room, to give generously towards an experiment, an idea that we had that God had put in our hearts, that there needed to be a church here in Cambridge, in this region, that had particular qualities. And so we asked people to give to that dream, that idea. And the idea behind that was that not to just start another church. The idea behind it was to start a particular message or carry a particular message as a church. And that would be a church that taught the full gospel, that taught people how to stand in faith until they saw their prayers answered, that helped people believe in a God who still does miracles, and to be a people who saw miracles. And we kind of phrased it under certain things. Looking back, there was key things that were qualities of that idea that we asked people to give generously to. And one of those was a church and a people who understand who they are in Christ and the full potential of life available to them. And, we major on that in our Rock Solid course, but we major on it in what we talk about. A church where people understand how to grow in faith. That is, how to trust God more and more in your life and depend less and less on yourself. And see the things that God has promised in your life and in our lives. And a church where people understand that we've got a covenant agreement with God that we live under the benefit from. And that's not a covenant of rules of do's and don'ts, because that's what a lot of people think church is about, do's and don'ts. But that's never been a covenant except for Israel, before Jesus ever came. But now we have something totally different, and we need to understand that it's a covenant paid for by Jesus for you and for others. And then a church that in teaching that full gospel, where we understand that you can know God and you can experience God. and you can experience his presence, and you can hear his voice, and you can be confident when you do that. And so that's part of the picture, but also part of that picture, and the thing that really moved Cheryl in the first place, and then to form Cheryl moved me, is for people who are just stuck in their faith. You see, 18 years ago, we encountered person after person after person who'd been around Christianity, been a believer for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and it had made no difference to their life because they didn't know what they had available to them in Christ. And they didn't know how to stand in faith. And they didn't know how to pray. And they didn't know how to hear the voice of God. And they didn't know who they were in Christ. And so we wanted to help people like that. And when we found people like that, we wanted what we were talking about to be a place where they could find fresh purpose, fresh impetus, fresh energy, fresh fire, a fresh relationship with Jesus. And also we wanted people to understand and know that we have a mission that is bigger than ourselves. That the church is supposed to be there for the benefit of those who aren't already there as well. So 2 things, discipleship for those who are there and reach those who aren't there. And so this is the idea that we ask people to give generously to, that original 8. And to be honest, we at that start, that first meeting, we had 8 members, no money, no property, no equipment, no chairs, no people, no refreshments. Well, we had in our kitchen, but apart from that, nothing, no internet, absolutely nothing when we were talking about this idea. Now, let me just kind of tell you about those 8 people. Because if I'd been God, I might have not started with those 8 people. Because sometimes we think everybody's going to be really qualified and amazing and super, super Christians and all that sort of stuff. Well, we were super, super Christians, of course. But so there was me and Cheryl. You know about me and Cheryl. And most of you know Les and Joyce. At that time, Joyce wasn't around very much. She was working down in Portsmouth or Plymouth, somewhere down there beginning with a P. And so it was basically Les. And Les came and told us all stories, as he did. So there was that. There was a single mum with 2 kids who, from 2 different fathers who just found Christ. There was Gemma, who's still around, not this morning, but most of you know Gemma, who just come to Christ through Cheryl. There was an Indian lady called Ida, who was just an amazing lady. And there was a lady from Namibia called Linda, who some of you know, Linda Elwell, who later married Pete. So Phil. So that's kind of who there was. And I'm looking around and I'm going, God, what are you doing? Why are you starting with us? Because we weren't super qualified. Yeah, I'd done Bible school and all the rest of it. But, we were stepping out in faith, just those 8 people. And one evening in those early weeks, somebody, I can't remember who it was, it definitely wasn't me, just so you know, said, if we're going to call ourselves Faith Life, then we really need to do something associated with faith. So we looked around the room and we said, right, what are we going to do? And it kind of came as this groundswell. We need to start meetings and invite other people to come. And we need to do it properly. So let's go and find somewhere we can hire that might take 50 people. And let's spend 15,000 on getting the right PA equipment. And let's hire ourselves a part-time worship leader. So that's how we started. And we asked people to give generously to that, and they gave generously. They gave above and beyond. And that's how Faith Life got started. Because to do anything requires resource. And to do anything for the kingdom requires resource. And it's sometimes easy to say, well, God can do that. But God does things through us. The whole point of the kingdom is it's a partnership between us and God. And so that idea became something much bigger. That idea became what you see this morning. Well, in fact, probably not what you see this morning, because there's loads of people away, but what we see kind of during term time when people are on holiday. But that idea became that. Now, here's the thing, and I'll give you fair warning if you want to leave now. Okay? This is kind of a pastor thing, a pastor challenge. In those days, to teach those things was challenging. But people could cope with challenge. And that's why they came. What I'm going to say to you over the next 3 weeks is equally challenging. But because I committed this to God, that I would teach whatever he put in front of me in his word and not water down the challenge and not avoid the challenge, that is a challenging course to take. And whilst 18 years ago the world was different, now it isn't. Now it is different, sorry. Now it is different. And it's different like this. You see, what we found right across the church world is people are less willing to face up to a challenge that affects them personally. And because we now have a very consumer-related society, and I'm being honest with you, I'm being frank with you, because there's a cost to me doing this, and I want you to understand that. The cost to me doing this is it is really easy for you not to listen to this, not to hear the challenge, and go and join another church. Because that has happened over all those 18 years. Because I will not teach and water down and avoid challenge because Jesus said these things. And if Jesus said these things, he meant us to live these things, not spend our life avoiding them by going somewhere that doesn't challenge. So I want you to understand that the next 3 weeks, I found the challenge of looking forward to that really costly. Because all the time you face that, and it's so sad, it breaks my heart when rather than deal with something on a personal level, people just go somewhere else. And honestly, some of you have come here on that basis over the years, and I'm glad you did. But hopefully I haven't watered anything down, and I won't water it down, because that's what God asked us to start in the first place. And that challenge, that initial idea that people gave generously to, over the years has become some amazing things. It's become this incredible work in Bulgaria that's just blossoming. This church managed to establish a relocation and a feeding program for Ukrainian refugees that way back 3-4 years ago when that war started, you guys gave 13,500 to start that. And because of that, we were able to rent a warehouse that was then able to store the food, and we were able to establish that, so much so now that it runs cost-free to us because of the connections that God made through us, through other ministries that gave generously to it, like the Copelands and like Joyce Meyer. And now there's this charity called Feed the Hungry who just ship pallets of food in for us. And that's providing 15,000 meals a quarter. And you guys helped start that. This church helped start that. There's a fantastic church in Croydon called Alive City that we love very much. We've helped that. We've mentored them. We look after them. We love them. And they are just absolutely blowing it out of the ballpark. It's just fantastic church. There's a small group in Norwich that get our teaching. They'll listen to this online. And they meet themselves during the week. Further than that, the influence that initial generosity produced. So, for instance, that idea became students and young people who daily live out the gospel. Not just live it out in isolation, but live it out now, down the line, in government, in business, in the media. We have people who grew up in those early years in this church and past years in this church who now make documentaries for Channel 4 and the BBC. And we have we've helped people who've established charities that help orphaned kids in London, help kids with that have gone on the streets in London, charities set up, people who are involved in healthcare, people involved in politics, right at the heart of the political parties. That's what that initial idea makes. And here's the point. We are not finished. We are not finished yet. But we need to keep that heart of generosity, to keep that level of influence and to keep that level going. Because that idea, that initial idea over the years, and will carry on being so, became lives saved. It became bodies healed. It became cancers gone. It became hopelessness turned to hope. It became disillusionment turned to joy. It became confusion turned to confidence. It became all those things because we would not compromise. And we would not do things, and we believed that God would always be there for us. You know, that idea also became kids who grew up and whose faith survived their teens, some of whom are sat in this room. One of whom led worship this morning. Those who drifted away, finding their way back to God. And those who were addicted, finding freedom from those addictions. That's what that idea became. And there's two of that original eight. Cheryl and I are just so grateful that we said yes. And we gave sacrificially. And here's something I'll tell you, and this is really important. None of us have ever missed the money we gave. And we would never go back on that decision. If we could make it all again, all of us would make exactly the same decision because of what we've seen and because of what God has done. And a few years from now, hundreds of men, women, and children will be grateful for you in that same way. For your generosity, for your obedience in following God. Now, another reason you don't need to get weirded out or worried about this whole topic about money, or switch off from listening, just in case you have. If you've switched off, now's the time to tune back in, is that those who have embraced this generous lifestyle, and some of you are those people, they will tell you, just like I have, that they've never regretted doing that either. And they are not going back on that either. And as one of those, I would never go back. And I am so grateful to those who taught me in the churches that I grew up in and have been part of that helped me understand things like tithing, or first and best giving is an easier way to say it, and understood the value and crucial importance of sharing in and investing in what God is doing around you and through the church that you are part of. Here's my point. You will never meet a follower of Jesus who allowed their money to follow Jesus and regretted it. You will never meet a follower of Jesus who allowed their money to follow Jesus and then regretted it. So you don't need to feel weird or worried or whatever on this topic of money. It's an opportunity to follow Jesus that will help you energize your whole relationship with him. And all of this is what I've kind of been building up, starts with one simple idea. And that's what I'm going to major on for the rest of this morning. One simple idea. And here's the idea that when we think about our possessions and our income and our wealth, we are stewards of those possessions, not owners. We are stewards of those possessions. And that's a really simple idea, really easy to say, and more challenging to get your head around. So there's the challenge that we're going to be facing up to. Okay. Now, here's what's exciting for me. For some of you, you already think like this. You've already got it. You've already understood this. And that doesn't mean you can switch off because, it's great to just get refreshed. One of the things by the way, who's completed the 30-day challenge on the videos? Yeah? Marvellous, amazing. I listened to them all again, and I had forgot some of that. It was even challenging to me to listen to it again. So it's always challenging to hear things again, even when we think we know them, because they kind of get put on a back burner and we forget about them a bit. But some of you are hearing this maybe for the first time. And others, maybe you've drifted from this over time. Now, this one simple truth about being stewards, it's something that if you go back to well before Jesus, go back to King David. So we're going back to King David. And he said it first. And long before Jesus reiterated it. In fact, some of the things that Jesus said, he was just expressing something that David had this revelation about. So when he had this revelation, he spoke it out in prayer. And we're going to look at that prayer this morning. Now, here's his first and his central point. Everything in heaven and earth is yours. And he's talking to God. Everything in heaven and earth is yours. In other words, God, you own it all. So we're just managers or temporary stewards of whatever is in our hands at any moment in time. That's his idea. Now, I'll give you some context to this. I'll give you some context to where this comes from. King David, he's on the throne in Israel. He's in his mid-50s by now. He's not that young guy who's slaying giants or beating lions up with jawbones or anything like that. He's on the throne. He's reigning. He's in his mid-50s. There is peace. All the enemies have been beaten back. There's peace in the land. All the border disputes are finished. And he decides, he decides, it's time for God to have his own temple. Because all the nations around, they've got temples to their gods, and we've got a tent. So we need something better than a tent, so let's build God this amazing temple to show God how much we love him. And until then, they'd had no concept that they were actually settling permanently. Because they had this tent that had been mobile for a generation. And what happens is his advisor, his trusted advisor, who was brilliant at listening to God, in fact, so brilliant at listening to God, he got called the prophet, this guy called Nathan, he comes along and he says two things. So the first thing he says is this: God is a mobile God. He's not meant to be tied to one place. But he appreciates that you want to do this for him. And then number two, but David, you can't build it because there's too much blood on your hands. And we need to start fresh. Now, I'd have been pretty upset if I was David, but David's not upset, bizarrely. David goes, okay, I agree. There's too much blood on my hands. It's for my son to build it. So what he does, he decides instead what he's going to do is get all the materials together to build his temple. And in his series of offerings, so he does a series of gift days. We call them gift days in church, so big offering days. And David personally funds the first of those gift days. And he gives the equivalent in today's money of 5 billion into the first offering. Okay, so pretty good to start a temple. This is going to be a cool temple. But the amount of money it costs to build a football ground now, we're talking about the temple. And here's what's exciting. So then he went to all the influencers, all the council, all the governors, and the military, and he tells them what he needs. So he went to all the people of influence and tells them, we need to fund this. And those people of influence, the leaders of all the different bits of his country, so just imagine all the different leaders in different areas for our church, and they said, without exception, we will all give willingly. So they all buy into it, like just those first 8 did, and like I'm asking you to do going forward. And they did this, and it's really interesting when you kind of read this story in depth. They did this, why? Because they saw this was an opportunity to participate in something that was bigger than themselves and which gave glory to God. That is priceless, the opportunity in life to participate in something that is bigger than you. Because otherwise you just have made your world so small, so tiny. And then, because all those people had given, all the ordinary common people across the land started giving, and they began to pour out generously. And it says the people rejoiced over the offering. So they're excited to give because they see that it's for God's kingdom and God's mission on earth. And they're excited about the opportunity to give to that. And they're full of joy at actually giving their stuff away. So they're excited, they rejoice, for they had given freely, without compulsion, and wholeheartedly. They've given from themselves. That's where their heart was, to the Lord. And that made King David happy. He says he's filled with joy. Because this idea that he had, and God had said, I appreciate it, let's do it, had come, and he'd seen all this happen, and he'd seen something go from nothing to reality. A bit like we did when we started Faith Life, nothing to reality. And David, who's so overwhelmed by all this, apart from being joyful, he starts to pray publicly. So this is actually a public prayer in front of maybe thousands of people. And this is kind of so important right now, because it reflects the heart. And it's so important right now for everyone in this room and everyone who's going to watch this online, who's on holiday and whatever. Because it reflects the heart and posture and attitude of anyone from any generation who really follows and trusts God. That's the attitude towards what we have that shows when we really are trusting God and we really are following Jesus. And in this prayer, he's going to tell us clearly about how he ended up viewing his income and the revelation that God had given him about his possessions and his income. So let's get further into that. It says, yours, so that's God's. Say with me, it's God's. It's God's. Is the greatness, that's God, the power, the glory, the victory, and the majesty. This is the reason why we are doing this. This is the reason for it all. And then he says this, say this, everything. I don't think you were enthusiastic enough about saying everything. Remember, it's your everything, and you're going to be filled with joy. So everything. Everything in the heavens and on earth is God's. Yeah, yours. Oh, Lord, and this is your kingdom. Everything in this world and everything you have and everything all of us have is God's. That's how the kingdom works. See what I mean about being challenging? And that's stunning. I think that's really stunning because this is King David saying this, who's just given away 5 billion. But he's king. He's king, Israel's greatest ever king, probably the greatest ever king who's ruled on the earth. And he's saying this, it's not mine. It's yours, God. It's yours, God. And then he says this, we adore you as the one who is over all things. So overall, David might wear this physical crown and he might be sat on his throne, but he's saying, I'm not confused because he knows who the real Lord is, the real head of his nation is. And then he says something that's so powerful, so powerful, that if we got it, if we get this, whatever our approach to giving has been, if we get this, it will transform our life. It will transform our life. It will transform others' lives. And it'll transform all our lives. If what he says next is front and center in the way we live our life. You listen to this. He's talking to you. Wealth and honor come from you alone. For you rule over everything. Power and might is in your hand, and at your discretion, people are made great and given strength. And David, he's just try and put that in different words. David is saying, I'm not confused about this. I've got this. I'm not confused about this at all. I have what I have because, God, you gave me it. And whether we feel it or not, this is true of me and you as well. All of us have what we have because God allows us to manage it for him. We've got position, we've got influence, we've got authority, we've got a career, we've got stuff. And what we save or spend or give, we have because of him. And I'm not trying to diminish the fact that you worked really hard. And you took advantage of opportunities that came along in your life. And you worked hard and God honored your work. You did your part. But ultimately, we all know, hopefully we all know, just think about this for a minute. Perhaps we don't all know, but hopefully we all know, we cannot control everything. Life is just too complicated. Life is just too random. Life is just all sorts of things. And people mess things up and other people mess you up and all that. And we don't control it. And we'd love to control it, but we can't. No one controls the variables. We just benefit from the opportunities. And there's so many variables and so many things outside our control that we can't be arrogant. There's so many things outside our control that we can't really take the credit for what we have. You cannot dictate your health. You can't dictate your family. You can't dictate your life. You can't dictate your genes. You can't dictate your internal drive that makes you want to get on. Or you can't dictate where you were born or who you were born to. There's just too many variables. And David was smart enough to know that he is not smart enough. So I'm not going to disagree with David because he had a big kingdom and he had the crown and he knew what he was talking about. I'm smart enough to know that I'm not smart enough to have seen and been provided for in my life like I've been provided for, and to have the opportunities that came my way. And David's smart enough to know that everything, his wealth, his health, his opportunity, his strength, his skill, his honor, his standing, his favor, all that comes from God alone. So, the only posture and attitude we should have is what? Gratitude, humility, and open-handedness. That's the only attitude we should have. And where we find ourselves veering from that, that's where the challenge is. That's what we have the choice of facing up to or not. And what he says next, if we would set our hearts like this, I can guarantee you, I'll guarantee this, if you do this, if you set your heart like this, you will be glad you did. And in fact, just like I was grateful for all those people that taught me this stuff over the years, you will be grateful if you'll set your heart like this in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time. You look back and you go, I'm glad. I'm really glad I heard that and I did it. And that's we went on from there. This is what David said. Who am I and who are my people that we should be able to give as generously as this? Who are we to have this opportunity to change so much in our lives and other people's lives by living generously? And he's asking this question. Why me? Why was I so fortunate? Why should it be me that has got the opportunity to be generous and give to this work? And here's his answer. Everything I have has come from you, and I'm giving you only what you first gave me. And that's an attitude to live with, and it's the attitude that you never regret once you start living with it. And here's the other thing that's connected with this. That attitude keeps your hands open to receive everything God has for you. So I'll just summarize it. What he's saying is, when I give stuff, I'm not giving anything. It's all yours. I'm simply giving it back what you gave me. And when that idea gets from our head to our heart, it's a game changer. So I don't want you to leave this in your head. I don't want you to go, well, that was really challenging. I'm not going to do that. I want you to work it through. If you haven't already got this, I want you to work it through. Because when you get it, life adds up differently. That weight and pressure, that get more, get, that drive of more, it falls away. And honestly, you feel better, you feel happier, you feel more peaceful, you feel fulfilled. So, to maximize our impact, like that original 8 impact was maximized, to maximize our impact, we have to maximize our personal generosity. To maximize our impact, we have to maximize our personal generosity. And in doing that, we can't afford to think like owners who give a bit to the church, who might donate occasionally to a good cause, but only if Mark sells it well enough to me. We can't afford to be that person. And if that's been your thinking, then I want to challenge you on that. It's not we're spreading around something that's ours and feeling better because we spread it around a bit. It's you are not an owner who has some money and occasionally or even regularly donates to church. You have to embrace this idea, this mindset, that you are a steward and everything belongs to God. And then you get to keep some and enjoy some and be blessed by God as a result of having that heart. And if you do that, there's going to be 3 results. If you'll do this, there'll be 3 results. First result, you'll view the results of this mindset, okay? These is 3 things that God tells you will happen if you embrace this mindset of being a steward and not an owner. The first one's this. You'll view everything you have as a potential tool to further the agenda of your king. Nikki mentioned that we have finally managed to exchange contracts on the sale of Arbor Grange. When we were incredibly blessed to be able to have that house. But we bought that house with an intention that it wouldn't just be our family home. It would be a place where people could come and they could live and they could stay as they got their lives together and they got their lives on track and they got themselves established. And over the years, if you've been around any length of time or even now, there's so many people actually in this room or have been in this church who have lived in our house for any time from 10 years to a few months. And there's been all sorts of different outcomes as a result of that. And some of you also know all the difficulties of living like that and the cost to us and the cost to our kids. But we don't regret the fact that we were able to sow into people's lives for the glory of God. It's not just cash. It's not just money. Everything belongs to God. Your heart should belong to God. And that's the game changer. So the first thing, you view everything as a potential tool to further the agenda of your king. Secondly, you'll give first and adjust your lifestyle accordingly. You'll give first and adjust your lifestyle accordingly. Now, you've probably heard this said, but if you haven't heard it said, I didn't write it down, but it's something that I've always lived by, and it's something that is right through the new covenant, is this. When you view things as a steward, you give first, save some, live off the rest. And when you do that, you find that the rest actually enables you to live better than if you'd spent it all. That's the way the kingdom works. Now, don't ask me how that works. I don't know. You know, when I look back on my career, I don't understand why things kind of went the way they did and why God prospered me, except that we were always faithful in doing this. And the things he got me through, which could have been like horrendous, career ending, and they all turned out well. Now, that's the thing you only learn in retrospect when you've done it. But I'm here to tell you that's how it works, because that's how Jesus said it works. Give first, give some, save some, live off the rest. And when you do that, you'll find that the rest actually goes further than if you'd spent it all. That's how the kingdom works. That's what God promises to you in his new covenant. And it's not easy, but if you do it, you'll never regret it. And the reason I'm standing up here, as I explained, is this is costly to do. This is risky to do in today's consumer-driven world. But the reason I'm telling you this is that Jesus wants this for you. He wants to get things to you. He wants to bless you. So ultimately, as a pastor, when people haven't got this, I get really sad. Because in a way, we're not really following Jesus with all our heart. But in another way, you just are missing out. You're missing out on so much. So if you begin thinking like this, if you'll just flip the script, because the kingdom doesn't work like the world. Everything, just health warning, everything I've said this morning, you will not find in any book telling you how to get on in life, except books that reflect the teaching of Jesus. This doesn't work like the world. It doesn't work like that at all. This is a supernatural thing. If we are followers of Jesus, we are not in a natural world. We are in a natural and supernatural world. And so when you begin thinking like a student owner, you look at everything as a potential tool. You give first and adjust your lifestyle accordingly. And what happens if you do that? You will find it easier to surrender your life to God. Can I have the worship team up? I'll say that again. You'll find it easier to surrender your entire life to God. Let me just finish with a story. You will... I'm doing this because I want to tell you the truth. Okay? I don't want you to feel manipulated. I'm just telling you what Jesus said. I'm just telling you what's in there. So I remember going way back to my university days. And I remember sitting in church one morning in the church where I'd grown up. And they were talking about giving and tithing. And I thought, this is terrible. I'm never going to that church again. And I was at university and got to my second year. And I kind of had this encounter with the Holy Spirit that just absolutely changed my life and nothing was ever the same afterwards. And during that encounter, I read a book. Some of you oldies might have seen this book or even read it, called Rich Christians in an Age of Hunger, by a guy called, I think, Ron Sider. Yeah, I don't think you can get it anymore. It was. I wouldn't recommend it. I can't remember anything it said now. So I'm not saying go and get it. That's not the point. The point is, I remember sitting at the bottom of my mum and dad's stairs one weekend when I gone home, and saying, "So what's this all about then?" And I'm going like, I'm a student. Like, I haven't much to give. And I remember looking forward through my life, and then I'm thinking, what's this? How's this all add up? And this thought came completely from left field, like God speaks to you, whether you get this thought from left field. And it was this. So if you live this way, and you never make any money, and you never have a successful career, and you just give it all away, you've still lived a great life. You've still lived a valuable life, and probably much more of a valuable life than if you thought it was all yours. And I just remember that thought coming. And so I started, and I'm going like, okay, God, if I never am a success in worldly terms, it's all yours and it's all for you. And we kind of lived that out. And so the next week, I gave £1. And I thought, I've got to start somewhere. But I didn't just give £1. I decided that every week I would increase it by 10%. So the next week I gave £1.10. And that's how I worked it up. Until I was tithing and God blessed us. But even if he didn't bless us, I would never have regretted it. Because I want to live a life of value. A life that affects other lives. A life that makes a difference. So I'm going to leave you 2 questions. And they're not easy questions. But from where I started, you're not going to expect easy questions, are you? Here's the first question. How far have I, this is your question, so you're the I, how far have I surrendered my life and possessions to the idea that I'm a steward for God with all I have? How far have you surrendered your life and possessions to that idea? And then the second question. We'll send you these round. How does that reflect in how I handle my finances right now with generosity for the work of his kingdom through his church? How does that reflect?